Jeremy, over to you.
Oh, it's exciting. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeremy Trevathan, otherwise known as Jez or Jezza. I'm the Managing Director of the Adult Division at Macmillan. I tell a lie. My real title is Managing Director of Macmillan Adult Books, but I think you can probably tell from that why I changed that to say Adult Division, because it sounds like I publish porn books. Delighted that you're all here today. I'll just give you a quick idea of Pan Macmillan, who we are. Pan Macmillan is probably it's between the third and fourth biggest publishing group in the UK. We vie a little bit with HarperCollins in that area. We have about 250 people. We're based in London, in Farringdon, in gorgeous, gorgeous offices that we moved into just before lockdown, which was a funny time to do it. We like to think of ourselves as the biggest of the small companies rather than the smallest of the big companies. It means that we have a very tight, almost like a family atmosphere in the company, and yet we are one of the biggest publishing houses in the country, and we publish some of the big names that you've heard about. And we're just a very, very lovely place to be. I'm going to hand over to Raki, who's going to tell you a bit more about PanMac.
So we are, as I said, based in Farringdon, and I think we're about 280 something employees as of today. And we do pride ourselves on being small enough to know everybody, but big enough to kind of play with the big boys. So being out there punching above our weight, I think, is our thing. And we have 8 departments. So this is going to be a test because I'm guaranteed to forget one. So we've got adult editorial, children's editorial, publishing operations, digital and communications, art and design, international sales, UK sales, finance, HR and contracts, and you are division number 8, Jez.
Art, did you say art department?
Yeah, I said art. Oh no, this is really embarrassing.
Happens.
I think that's everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're right. Yeah, I think we've got everyone. If I haven't, I'm really sorry. Someone who from work is going to be watching and give me a bit of a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
Not my job or anything to know, who's in the business. So we're doing this event because we are very aware that publishing is pitched as this very traditionally middle-class white industry, but books are for everybody. So we, as a business, recognise that we need to do better at representing our audiences within the business, but also because diversity is so important in everything that we do. So the amount of audiences that we can reach by diversifying internally, but also we want to represent our readership internally too. So we want everybody to understand that publishing is an accessible career and an accessible place to be for everybody, because there's so many transferable skills that you get, and you'll hear me harping on about transferable skills through this whole week, because there's so much that you learn in every other job, in every other industry, from retail to restaurants to even just being an admin person in an office, and actually even from your group work at university, if you've been to university or college. So there's lots of transferable skills that you can bring on board into a role, and it's about how you pitch yourself to get there. So there'll be lots of information about that as we go through the week. So Jez, why don't you talk to us a little bit about how you got into publishing, because your trajectory into your position wasn't what people would class as traditional.
Sure. I did a degree at uni, but as Raki said earlier on, you don't necessarily have to have a degree at uni. But at the end of it, I didn't know quite what I wanted to do, and I discovered that there was a publishing course available at Oxford Brookes University. I did that. Like most people who think about going into publishing, I assumed I would go into editorial, but what I discovered was that doing this course was that there are all sorts of other jobs, and I actually started out in production, which is the department where you talk to printers and the binders and the jacket printers, and you sort all that sort of stuff out. So I started out in production. I then moved into an area called subsidiary rights, which you'll hear about probably later in the week, which is a little bit complicated to go into now. But suffice it to say, it's a sales department, much like the sales team selling to bookstores. It's people who sell rights, like translation rights to foreign publishers, or film rights to film companies. So I worked in that department, and actually it wasn't for about 20 years before I even got near being in the editorial department. And so that's my sort of trajectory. One of the things that I really wanted to stress here about this is that you don't need a degree to get a job in publishing. There are all sorts of roles that require all sorts of skills that lots of people have. And main skills being communication. So it'd be good if you can communicate what you think about stuff and what you think about books that you've read. It's really, I would say it's a good thing to be passionate about books if you want to work in publishing, mainly because everyone else is passionate about books. So you'll have a lot of fun talking about books with everyone. And actually you'll hone your communication skills because we're all just nattering about books the whole time. But there are other skills that you can learn, just even office skills or, Excel sheet skills, things like that. Skills that you learn at school that are necessary for all sorts of different roles in a publishing company. So don't necessarily think that it's all about being editorial, and actually don't also necessarily think that we're all a bit snooty about books. We love all sorts of books. We publish all sorts of books right through from, well, we do actually publish some porn, actually. We publish some porn, some erotica. It's called erotica, actually. But we do that. We do graphic novels. We do funny nonfiction like Adam Kay, the This Is Gonna Hurt, that book that did incredibly well. We publish The Gruffalo. We publish The Secret Barrister. We publish David Olusoga, the historian, who's very high profile at the moment. And we published Elton John a couple of years ago. So we do all sorts of stuff like that. So please understand that we're trying to let you realize that no matter what skills you have, you can probably work in publishing, and they don't need to be university driven.
Exactly. And Jez, before we go, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. If you had one book, Desert Island book, what would it be?
Desert Island book. Well, to be honest, it's a book that we don't publish, but it's my favorite book ever. And it's a book called The Mouse and His Child by an author called Russell Hoban. And when I read it as a kid, it was the book that made me realize what books could do, because it made me laugh and cry at the same time. It was the first time that anything did that, and made me have that sort of ache that you can get sometimes reading a book or watching a movie. And it's the first time I sort of got that from a book. And I suppose that was the first thing that ever made me think I liked books.
Amazing. So on that note, everyone, you should bear in mind some of your favorite books as you're going through this, and relate that back to why you could work in publishing and what that meant for you, because that's what we love about our jobs, is that we really bring emotion with what we can provide. So have a really good week. I'll be popping up a little as we go. I'm going to hand you over to James now. Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Raki. Thank you very much, Jeremy. Hello, everyone. My name is James Spackman. I'm a publisher and literary agent. I'm not going to give you my whole life story and CV. It'll take far too long. Suffice it to say, I work with Jessica Killingley, who you're going to hear from in a second, and also our colleague Jason Bartholomew, who you'll meet later on this week. And the three of us make up the BKS agency. We're literary agents. One of the other things we do is do events like this for potential new entrants into the publishing industry. So like our friends at Pan Macmillan, we really want to open up the publishing industry to everyone. I've personally had absolutely every single privilege going when it comes to my career, but publishing should be available to everyone, not just people like me. So our way of helping open up the industry is really through the medium of information. We want to give people the knowledge that they need in order to understand it in all its, frankly, slightly confusing glory. So you're going to hear a lot about the joys of publishing from lots of different people over the course of our week, from people that work in publishing and love it, But the first half of this evening is going to be a real kind of brain dump. It's going to be an explainer all about how the industry works. So that's the first half of this evening. And then the second half, we're actually going to do an interactive session, which I hope you'll find enjoyable and illuminating. Jessica.
Yes, thank you, James. Are you moving some slides on?
Of course, yeah, that is exactly what I'm doing. That was Macmillan, and this is us.
That's us. Thank you. So I am Jessica Killingley, and the reason that I really love publishing is that it's given me a career where I've got to make really, really cool, impactful stuff. I've been able to wear trainers to work, and I swear a lot in meetings. So that was been my joy of publishing. But seriously, the thing that drives me the most about publishing is that publishing only works if it's relevant. Now, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I genuinely believe that books have got the power to change our lives, but they have to be about our lives. They have to be about who we all are at the very core of our cultural and social landscape. And everyone you're going to hear from in publishing, we all talk about how much we love books and writing, but we all have to channel that passion into making sure that we stay relevant, that we develop a diverse and energetic industry. And that doesn't happen when things stay the same. And as James said, our goal is to open up what has previously been a closed and confusing industry, so that the love of books and writing can stay at the heart of who we are as individuals and as communities. Now, you heard already that publishing is a career for everyone, no matter what level of education, qualification or knowledge, age or prior experience. But if I had to pin it down to two things that I think are essential qualities, then I would go for curiosity and enthusiasm. So I really hope that what you hear over the course of this week sparks both of those for you all. So a few bits of housekeeping. If we could have the next slide. We're going to be recording this, but this is for future sharing for anyone that's able to not attend. So it's only our speakers that are going to be on the recording, so you don't worry about any of you being shown online. Please do talk about it on Twitter. You'll see the handles of some of the presenters coming up, and our hashtag Get Driven Publishing. And then also, we want you to ask as many questions as possible, and we'd like you to do it using Slido, and there's the access code for you there. If we use the chat on this, there's lots of you on here, your questions might get lost, but what we can do is if you ask questions on Slido, we can upvote other people's questions. We can go through them, get through as many as we can in the week, then answer all the rest on Friday. And then any that we don't get to, we'll be able to do that after the event, whether it's written or video answers. And then when you get the recordings of the event, all of those answers will be there. So what we're going to do, as James said, we're going to have a little publishing explainer, and then we'll do the breakout session. So if we could just jump through the next couple of slides. This is just very quickly what we're going to be doing all week. As you can see, we're going to be getting onto other careers later in. And then just for today, so we're going to be looking at what a publisher does on the next slide. How a book gets published. James then is going to talk about how a book gets published. How does the money part of it work? And then we're going to come and do our breakout session. So I'm just going to kick off very quickly with what does a publisher do and, importantly, not do. So the first thing I want to acknowledge is that, as you know, you've heard us refer to publishing as being a bit of a confusing industry. It is a bit of a weird industry because it's not really like working for a normal company that makes or sells stuff where you've got like one single product and a clear end user, and you know the only variation that you might have is that you're doing a different flavor of Kit Kat this month. A publisher is a manufacturer, both of physical product and not physical product. It's also a manufacturer of ideas. It's also an investor. Publishing invests in people, in talent, and kind of intangible things sometimes that don't really necessarily make a sensible business model. Publishers are cultural institutions. They are a preserver of legacy and, most importantly, an innovator of the future. So we are creators and curators. And we're all salespeople, but, you know, absolutely embodying integrity above all else. But of course, equally, we are literally flogging the blood, sweat and tears of the people who frequently spend a very long time to try and get inside our walls and get accepted as authors. Once we have let them in through the walls and we have accepted them as an author, then we can be their best friend and their support system. And I'm sure in some cases a thorn in their side, because all authors will secretly tell you that they love to moan about their publishers. And actually, now that I'm on this side of the table as a literary agent, I can kind of get where they're coming from. Anyway, so on this graphic you have here on your screen, this represents what you might call the kind of classic model of publishing. So it's like the traditional publishing ecosystem. So we have in the middle trade publishers. Now, people use the word trade to denote publishers who mainly do books for the general audience, like you and me. This is books for entertainment or information. So that's different from academic publishing or professional publishing, where they might publish textbooks or kind of really specific manuals. Now, some very big publishers exist in the UK, and those really big ones tend to be conglomerates of one sort or another. And they often become those large companies by buying other companies. So Penguin Random House is a good example, and Hachette is another one. So Hachette comprises of 5 really big and then loads of small other companies that have all been smooshed together. Quite often, the big conglomerates will often have big American branches. So that means they'll have offices in New York, but also in other American cities, as well as a really big international global profile. So this is where it starts to get confusing. Confusingly, they tend to retain the brand of the companies that they bought and have absorbed into the whole, calling them divisions. So for example, when Little Brown, the publishing company, got bought by Hachette, the publishing company, it continued to call itself Little Brown, but that was the name of their division. Now, to make that confusion worse, Little Brown and all the other divisions in publishing has got imprints. So an imprint is like a sub-brand. Oh, am I okay? An imprint is like a sub-brand. So it's a bit like a boutique record label. So if you think about what you see the logo on the side of your side. Oh, have you lost me?
No.
I think you're fine, Jessica.
I'm back. Okay, sorry.
You go for it.
So sorry, I was talking about imprints being like sub-brands, so like a kind of a boutique record label. So, and that's when, if you look on the spine of the book, you've got the little illustration at the bottom of the spine, that logo, or technical term for that is a colophon. Those are the imprints that make up divisions, that make up bigger publishing houses. It is quite hard to understand a family tree of a big organization, even when you're inside it, to be honest. Some of these firms can employ hundreds or even thousands of people around the world, and these big conglomerates tend to sort of dominate the industry financially. So the big 3 are Penguin Random House, Hachette, and HarperCollins. But then you've got the other big companies like our guests, Pan Macmillan and Simon & Schuster. So they're a little bit more compact, but they're still big players. They're still big firms. Interesting topical illustration of this is that Simon & Schuster has just been bought by Penguin Random House. So it will continue to trade under the name of Simon & Schuster, but as a division of a bigger company now. So then we've got the mid-sized publishers and then the little ones. And those little ones are often called independents or indies, and they can be kind of niche publishers. So they can be doing books for particular interest like military history or music. Or they could just be small publishers that do a little bit of everything. So we've got here One World or Atlantic, good examples of like a small generalist. And they can sometimes be spread all over the country and not just based in London. Although an interesting side effect, one of the benefits post-lockdown, is that we are starting to see some of the big companies open up regional offices around the UK. And I think that's a really, really brilliant initiative. And it's great that that's happening. Then we've got some publishers, both large and small, that might specialize in illustrated books, so cookbooks, art books, basically anything that's full color, because the way that those are commissioned, created, edited, produced, printed is very different to black and white books. And then we also have other publishers that might focus solely on children's books. Others, bigger publishers, will have a specialist children's list. So for example, we'll be hearing from people on Macmillan's children's books later this week. So then we have the organizations that surround publishers, and these are the people that allow these books to happen. So we've obviously got authors and illustrators. They are the ones that are making the words and the pictures. Then we've got the literary agents like James and I, and we represent the interests of the authors. We develop ideas with them, we pitch them to publishers, we try to get good deals for them. If you're an editor in a trade publisher, then agents are kind of a big deal to you, because for the most part, they are going to be the principal way that a new project comes across your desk. Then we've got printers. They make the books. So black and white paperbacks tend to get made in the UK because it's really fast and it's really cheap. And obviously, due to kind of volume, bigger publishers get better deals. Color books, usually for reasons of cost, tend to get printed in either Central, Eastern Europe or China. It's really expensive and it's really slow because they get sent over by boat. And then we've got distributors. So they're the ones that store all the books in their big warehouses and they send them out to retailers, and they're typically doing all the invoicing and the paperwork. Big publishers own their own, smaller ones like use the bigger ones for a small fee. Then we have finally the retailers, which is where we get front facing to the end user, to the customer. So obviously online, people like Amazon, and then offline, we have specialists of bricks and mortar. We've got specialist bookshops like Waterstones, or general ones like Smiths and supermarkets. And then of course, finally, very often undervalued, but a very important route to readers are libraries. And then kind of swimming around the edges, there is an army of freelancers that go into making up publishing. There's translators, designers, copy editors, all sorts of people like that, professional specialists who are part of the industry as individuals, and they're just kind of hired on a contract basis as and when. So that is pretty much the ecosystem of the whole industry.
Fantastic, Jessica. Thank you so much. If you can hear me, I think your audio has gone a bit funny, but if you can, I was just going to ask you to share the code for the Slido, but somebody's already done it. That's marvelous. Okay, let's move on. Now, Jessica has given you a brilliant overview of the industry sort of as an ecosystem. Now let's dig in quickly to the core of what a book publisher actually does, basically how they make a book. So this is going to be the life cycle of a book from beginning to end in 10 minutes. Wish me luck. Many of the stages that I touch upon here are going to be explained in more detail in the sessions that follow throughout the week. So don't worry if I seem to skim over something that's important. It probably will be covered later on. Okay, so what is the start point? Where do books come from? It's usually when an email pops into a publisher's inbox with a manuscript attached. And by manuscript, I basically mean a Word document. It could have come from the author's literary agent, as Jessica just said, and that agent might have sent it to several different publishing companies at the same time, hoping that they all compete to sign it up and to publish it. Or it might have been sent out of the blue by an author individually, an unsolicited manuscript, as we call it. Some publishers take them, look at them, take them seriously, others don't. And sometimes it's sent by a foreign publisher. So, you might get a publisher in Paris emailing to say, we've just put this out in French. Would you like to buy the rights to translate it into English and publish it in your territory? So as I say, for fiction, it's usually a full manuscript, the whole text. For non-fiction, it's slightly different. Usually the author will only write part of the book, a kind of a document to summarize their approach and a writing sample to give an idea of their execution. So if I wanted to write the definitive book on, I don't know, like knitting raincoats or something, I'd have to do a proposal, which was, this is why the world needs a book about knitting raincoats, and then chapter 1. Select your wool or whatever. I can't believe I've gone down that particular weird rabbit hole. The next stage is the acquisition process. Now, the manuscript or the proposal probably landed in the inbox of a commissioning editor, and you're going to meet some commissioning editors tomorrow. They're the people who do deals to sign up books, and then they lead those publications from that point onwards. But first, what they need to do is persuade their colleagues, well, I've just been sent this book, I really like it, I think this will be successful. So how do they do that? Well, usually they send around the manuscript to a lot of colleagues or the proposal, and then they get together to discuss it in an acquisitions meeting. And that's something that you're going to be having a go at yourselves shortly. They discuss it and they come to a consensus about its potential. And they do a kind of a financial evaluation about how many copies they think they can sell and how much money that will bring in, and therefore how much money they can offer to the author. And they'll be talking about other sort of more intangible things, like just really how much they care about it. But there is also usually some commercial maths involved. And that determines the size of the offer to the author. Now, what the author's agent wants is to have several publishers bidding to acquire the book, thus creating what we call an auction, the price going up and up as people compete to sign it up. People drop out until there's one winner. It can be very exciting. Some people in the publishing industry just absolutely live for this stuff. When it's done, if we've won, we sign a contract with the agent, and yeah, we are the publisher of the book. Now, I say the price goes up and up in an auction situation. What is that price? It's essentially what publishers are offering the author is an advance. That's shorthand for an advance against royalties, and that's a lump sum that the writer gets up front, and I'm going to explain about that next. Okay, so the book is acquired. What happens next? Next in the life cycle, loads of sort of behind the scenes stuff, really. So this is stuff that a publisher can get on with while the author's actually writing or sort of polishing their text. We set a publication date, which can be like a year or often more in advance, which seems like an awfully long time, but there is a lot to get done in the meantime. And what else is happening? Well, there's an internal sell. As an editor, as a commissioning editor, I'm trying to make sure that all my colleagues understand what we're trying to do with this book, how we're going to make it successful, get people to buy into it and get excited about it. Do lots of stuff with data, making sure that the feeds go out to, the data feeds go out to online retailers, so it's correctly categorized. It's not kind of my, you know, raincoat knitting book isn't going to come up, you know, as erotica on online searches or whatever. And we'll be doing things like writing the back cover copy as well, which is vital, the blurb for the back of the book. And speaking of covers, the book obviously needs a front cover too. So the commissioning editor will generally brief the art department to do a front cover design. You know, how do we want our book to communicate with potential readers, essentially, is the question that brief answers. The art department then get to work, they show their work in progress. Usually at this point you have a massive row about it because everybody has opinions about book covers and it's incredibly important. So that can be quite intense, but it's all done in a very loving way generally. But eventually that gets agreed and it gets signed off. All the while that's happening, there's lots of editorial processes going on with the actual text. So the commissioning editor will normally give like top level feedback to the author. Sometimes called a structural edit or a top line edit. And that will be sort of like, oh, can you do more of this, less of that, maybe put this section to the front, maybe do the whole thing in the third person singular or whatever. And then after there's been some toing and froing and they've agreed on the text, the author, you know, is finished revising the manuscript, it'll get sent to a copy editor. So that's a specialism in itself, copy editing. These people are kind of editorial technicians who'll go through the text line by line, fine-tuning the grammar, eliminating any ambiguity. Around 6 months ahead of publication, the sales team, or maybe even before actually, the sales team will start, you know, what's called the sell-in, telling retailers all about the book and trying to secure promotion. And that happens in the UK and in export. And then the rights team, who you'll hear about, they'll start trying to sell subsidiary rights or sub-rights. So this is essentially things like translation rights. You know, they'll get in touch with Italian publishers, say, do you want to buy the Italian rights to this? You know, same in China, same in Japan, whatever. That's a great way for a book to earn money. It's slightly less visible, but it's incredibly important. And also at the same time, the marketing team is getting to work. So they can support the work of the sales team with trade marketing, as it's called, producing material which will help get retailers excited, and also producing display material so that they can put it in windows and stuff like that. They'll also maybe do some consumer marketing, and that can be traditional, like big posters, you know, outdoor advertising like that. It can be radio, it can be online, you know, it can be kind of social media advertising. They've got so many different options, and you'll hear a bit more about that on Wednesday. They'll be producing proof copies, or ARCs, ARCs, advanced reading copies, and they're going to get used by lots of different parts of the company. And then you've got the lovely folks in the publicity department doing their thing as well. Oh, sorry, no, we've got the production department first. Sorry, I forgot about them. So yeah, the production department, they get their hands on the text. They will agree with the commissioning editor what the format is going to be. Literally, is it hardback, paperback, what size? Everything to do with the font, you know, the decorations, the size of the lettering, etc., etc. they set about printing it. And they also take control of conversion into ebook and to audio. And then the publicity department, they might have started working quite a long time ago, but they really, really get busy when there's finished copies of the books turn up, hardback or whatever it is. And they're sending them out to loads and loads of different types of media. They're sending them out to broadcast people like TV and radio, to press for reviews, and also, you know, suggesting that authors are interviewed or write features which relate to the book, lots of different stuff like that. And they might even also arrange signing tours. So obviously that was pre-COVID, a really big deal, lots and lots of live signing tours. Now you're more likely to do a kind of like a blog tour, but probably the live events will come back too. Now, so eventually you get to publication day, yay. What happens? What are the outcomes? Well, first of all, the book's going to sell some. We know how many we've sold because it's gone out of our warehouse, but there's also BookScan, which you need to know about. So a company called Nielsen, they collect data. It's a bit like the pop charts. They collect data on copies of books which have actually been sold by retailers to real people. And so if there's a bit of a mismatch between the two, we've sold 10,000 copies to our retailers, but in the first week, only 100 copies have actually been bought by real readers, then we know that there's a massive surplus out there in the market. And unfortunately, retailers are allowed to send it back for a full refund. God knows who came up with that rule, but anyway, they are. Anyway, if the book sells well, we might reprint it. If they all come back, we all cry. In the longer term, other outcomes as well, which actually I've missed off that slide, but essentially, there might be follow-up, there might be a new edition, you know, movie tie-in. The book might become a backlist title and sell on for decades and make loads and loads of money. Right, so that was a whistle-stop tour of the life cycle of a book. I'm slightly conscious of the time, so I'm going to rattle on and tell you about how the money works. Now, I mentioned before that advances and royalties were going to be something that we explained in a little bit more detail. Now, this might seem a little bit technical, but I think it's a really, really important thing to understand. It's really a central concept that underpins a lot of stuff in publishing. So if you go to a job interview, to understand how this works is really kind of foundational. And I think it'll probably kind of color your understanding of how authors work and how publishers work. So let's look at this from an author's point of view. This is you, right? You're an author. And you own something. You own the copyright in the text that you've written. Okay, so you've written a novel, that's yours, that's your copyright. Now, you're not going to sell that copyright, you're going to license it. You're going to license it to a publisher and allow them to print it and make money out of it, sort of on your behalf. So here's a publisher, looks a bit like me, apparently. So, and you're not selling that license in your copyright for a flat fee. Instead, traditionally, you're going to be selling it in exchange for a proportion of the sales income, and that's called a royalty. So let's say your publisher that you've done a deal with proposes to put your book out at a price of £10. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that your royalty, your share of that, is going to be 10% of the cover price. So in this case, it's going to be £1 for every book. Now, because it takes absolutely forever to write and publish and sell a book, everybody would starve if you had to wait until those sales happened and you started accumulating your £1. So the tradition has grown up that publishers offer authors a non-refundable down payment against royalties. So that's the advance. They're giving you the royalties before your book sales have actually earned them. So let's say your advance is £10,000. When the book goes on sale, every time a book is sold, you earn £1. The publisher earns the other 90%, the £9. So you earn £1, except you've already had it. So in fact, those pounds go to pay back your advance. And you pay those back steadily. You pay the advance back steadily until the happy day that you've paid back the entirety of the advance, in this case, £10,000. And that's called earning out your advance. Book sales aren't the only way to do this. I mentioned sub-rights before, translation rights, large print, all sorts of things like that. They actually earn authors quite a decent, you actually earn quite a decent proportion of that. It's more than 10%, a lot more. They also go to help earn out your advance. And anyway, if you earn out and then in the happy day that happens, then any further book sales on top of that become like incremental royalties. You get that extra. So you never have to pay back the advance apart from particular circumstances, but the only way to get extra on top of that is incremental royalties after your book has earned out. For reasons that nobody really knows, publishers tend to pay out royalties every 6 months. It's a slightly slow system, but anyway. Now, lest you think that the publisher is just completely making out like a bandit here by getting the 90% of the book sales, do bear in mind that they've got other mouths to feed as well. So they are paying for the book to be printed. The bookshop actually, depending on the size of the retailer, they'll actually be buying the books roughly at half price, bit less, bit more. So that's kind of taking money out of their share. The distributor needs to get paid. And all the promotional stuff, the publisher pays for that. It's not like in the music industry where those costs kind of come from your contract. Actually, the publisher pays. Okay, so I think we need to wrap that up there. So that's the whistle stop tour of advances and royalties. And now I'm going to hand you over back again to Jessica to explain our little group session. Jessica, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, James. That was a good whistle stop tour. And you do look like the little cartoon. I never noticed that before. So how do publishers decide what to publish? So one of the key decisions a publishing company makes is, of course, like, do we want to publish this book? And that tends to go beyond, the reasons for that go beyond, well, do we like it? Although that is a good starting point. And it goes into, can we make it successful? Are we going to make any money out of this? So what we're all going to do now is we're going to do an exercise. We're going to put you into breakout groups of 6 people. And so in your group, you're going to be discussing the merits and the potential of 3 unpublished books. So these are the 3 books that we sent you information about before the course. There's 1 fiction, 1 non-fiction, and 1 children's book. And you're going to have about 20 minutes to have your meeting, and your task is to come to a collective decision about which book you think has got the greatest potential, and then which would be the second and which would be the third. So then when we come back together again, we'll get you to share some of your results. We'll hear from some of you who want to contribute and some of the things that you've discussed. So here are some things for starters that you could be thinking about. If you could pop the next slide up for me, James. So is it in a popular category? Will the author help us promote it? Is it original? Does it have a clear concept? Very important one. Who is actually going to buy it? Who is the audience for it? Does the world need it? That's an interesting question. I can think of some books that we published that maybe didn't get answered by that question. And are there non-commercial reasons to publish it? Do we think it's actually an important book, that, it's actually an important part of, our cultural fabric, that this book needs to be published? So James is going to randomly split you into breakout groups of 6. Now you might end up with a Pan Macmillan person in your group. So if you do, and if you are a Pan Macmillan person, admit that you are. But ask them questions if you want. But it's mainly time for you all to kind of explore the process. So don't lean on them too much. We will do you a little alert when you're about halfway through, and then you'll get a 1-minute warning before we come back together. So off you go, James.
Hi. Is there anyone I can speak to?
Hi, Niti, what's up?
In our group, no one has had the email with the reference material, so we're not too sure what
I've
to
popped
do.
the link into the chat. It was on the emails that you guys would have got last week. If you have a look in the big chat, I've put the link on there.
Oh, I can't seem to see anything on the chat. I mean, sorry.
Have you clicked on the chat function?
Yes, I've just clicked now. There doesn't seem to be anything in my message inbox. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Hello.
Rocky, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
I just had somebody saying that they didn't get the email. Were you getting that from other people as well?
I think people have had the email, they've not read it properly. So I've put the link into the big chat. So if you can share that.
Oh, well done.
Hi everyone. Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Are we in a private room?
No.
Oh, okay. No, just wondering. No, just because I wanted to let you know I could hear you, but I didn't know if you guys knew. So I think there may have been some confusion with the link. I actually thought it was meant to go out on Thursday. So to everyone who is listening, I think this is my bad. But I put this in the chat. But yes, so.
And Sam, if you can push an email out to everybody now with it on, that would be really helpful.
I'll do that now, but don't worry, there will be all the links being sent to everyone from now on. It's just my bad.
Don't worry. I'm going to do an alert now to everyone in all the rooms saying that we'll come back together in 5 minutes, kind of come what may, okay?
Thanks.
Welcome back, everyone. We're just waiting for everyone to exit the breakout rooms so we can have a chat. So, nice to see some of your faces. Excellent. Now, the first thing to say is apologies to anyone who didn't get the email. You were all supposed to have been sent 3 documents, which were sort of chunk of a manuscript, a proposal, and some kids' work in progress, which you could use as sort of potential acquisitions. I gather there might have been a little bit of a hitch with some of you, but hopefully others did get it. So what I'd really like to do now is just ask for a volunteer. So who would like to, if somebody would like to do a kind of digital hand raise thing, if they would like to just tell me which book their group decided was the best prospect, the one that they wanted to publish the most. Who'd like to? Actually, you could do a like an actual physical hand up or a digital one. Don't mind. Okay, Ema, is that how, am I pronouncing that correct?
Ema.
Ema, sorry about that. Ema, tell us about your group's discussions and where you kind of ranked these 3 projects.
We kind of ranked the children's book as the most, the one we would prefer to publish most, because it had already had rights to or had been published in 7 other languages, so it already had a strong base.
Okay.
In terms of marketability and success of the writer prior, that it had a good basis in terms of a building on an already there existing reading audience.
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of thought that the non-fiction would be least marketable, because whilst there is a very saturated market already for self-help books, and so while there's a big market, if you're not being really innovative and creative in what you're doing, you're not going to build up a long-lasting book or reading book. People will read it and not recommend it, put it down, throw it away. So that's kind of where we went with it.
Thank you so much for that, because those are 2, I think, really important sort of concepts which come up in acquisitions discussions an awful lot. The first is sort of like, what evidence do we have that this person, that this person can do a successful book? And of course, if they've got track record, that's very reassuring, isn't it? But then, as you say, there's also the thing about, well, what else is there out there? Sometimes you can feel reassured or emboldened by the fact that there's lots of books on a topic coming out, and you could say, well, this is a trend. I remember a few years ago, well, actually quite a few years ago, when everyone seemed to be publishing books on mindfulness. That was like a real trend. And actually, if you got onto that trend relatively early, you'd have probably sold loads of books. But then if you got onto that trend just as it was dying off, and of course, bear in mind that there's a gestation period to think about. So you're trying to predict what's going to happen in a year's time or more. Then you can actually find that you've made the wrong choice. Thank you so much for that. Did anybody put the non-fiction book at the top of their priority lists? Maybe raise your hand or do a digital hand raise, and I'll invite you to unmute. No one went for the top. So what about the fiction title? Did any groups rank that their favorite? Is that Stephanie? Are you raising your hand there, or have I misunderstood that? Stephanie Clark, hello.
Yeah, we like the look of single-role female. We thought the crossover, the fact that it was a mix of these are the Fault Stars and Bridget Jones would appeal to multiple different audiences. And then we also thought that the topic is relevant to everyone. If you haven't suffered from cancer, someone who has. So it would be something that people would probably read to relate to and escape at the same time.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. So you got into thinking about how readers would respond to it, what they'd get out of it emotionally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Did anybody find that they had a real difference of opinion in their meeting, or were they generally fairly? Did you come to a consensus quite easily?
We all agreed quite easily.
Yeah. Okay. Was anybody sort of surprised by kind of like the factors that came up, or the things that things that people were trying to make a decision based on?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to just butt
Go for
in.
it. Yeah,
But
go for it.
I mean, I was surprised. I got the pitches like a minute before, but I was surprised reading the By Your Bootstraps pitch, get to the end of it, and I think it's just going to be a typical self-help motivation, but then you see all the author's qualifications, and I feel like that didn't come through in the pitch. And I think the reason why none of us were really keen for it is because it just seemed like a pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of counter book, I guess.
Okay.
And I think that expression is so overused that people assume that it's going to be something kind of harsh and not very, I guess, legit. But I think if it was presented a different way, it could have seemed like a real academic, legitimate study.
That's interesting. So they in the kind of the hierarchy of messages there, they've gone with the concept first, and that wasn't one that struck you as original. But then the credentials were kind of buried in a sense. Yeah, interesting. Well, I in some ways, it's quite good that you did a hyper-realistic publishing simulation there by rushing to read the material. That is actually the reality far often than it should be.
James, yeah, I was just going to jump in because actually that on that non-fiction project, it's really interesting what people have said about it, because this was when I would have got really argumentative, because when I was in-house, I was a marketing director. And so an editor might come with something like this and be like, oh, look it's amazing. Look how many qualifications they've got. They're really, really like well established in their academic field. And I would be like, I don't care, because they haven't got a following online. No one's ever heard of them. So no one's going to want to buy this book. But in reality, obviously, I'm as I mentioned before, I used to swear a lot in meetings. But in reality, what that would mean would be that when a book like this is published, it becomes really, really dependent on the publicity team to get coverage in the press, to make a bit of noise about it. And the author isn't able to do that much for themselves. So what you find is that you get an internal struggle with one part of the business saying, oh, they're not well known enough, they haven't got a big enough platform. And then like the editorial saying, but they've got amazing credentials, and they've got they're a really good academic, and the quality of the writing will be really good. So you can see where we kind of bump up against each other, that sometimes one wins and the other doesn't. But it's usually the publicity department that ends up getting caught in the crossfire either way, actually, because they're the one that have to carry the weight. If a book gets published and it's a bit quiet and maybe it's not selling out from the retailers, then usually the sales director will go to the publicity department and say, could you just maybe get another interview for the author? And then if that doesn't work, then they come to the marketing department and say, could you just do another tweet about it? So it's an interesting thing to think about, what somebody's kind of qualifications, how that can help actually take that book out to market. But yeah, it's a good one to pick that.
Absolutely. Eleanor, I think you've got a question, and after that, I think in order to end on time, we ought to round up. But yeah, fire away.
Sorry, I did not realize the time. I just kind of wanted to ask, how often in those conversations does it kind of come down to a question of how to package a book versus how to package an author in those decisions to like sway you one way or the other?
Jessica, do you want to field that?
That's a really good question, and I think it depends on. It will depend a lot on the author's profile, and also on who the audience is, because sometimes So for example, I published a book with Penguin Business last year, and the author didn't have a very, very big profile, which is kind of, it was a bit of a punt because, she was writing a book on redundancy and losing your job, of which there was nothing on the market. So when that was acquired, it was sort of done on the basis of, the package of the book is going to be the thing that really first takes it out to market, because no one will have heard of the author. That then is developed. So since the book has come out, the author has then gone on to do loads of PR. She's driven loads of podcasts, all that kind of stuff herself. So she has started to become more known through the book, but it's quite often usually the other way around. And again, it becomes a bit of a, I feel as an agent, I'm knocking on the door going, I know they've only got a small profile now, but in a year's time, they'll be fair. And the editors are like, well, come on, like nobody's going to heard of them. So it is, we do often horse trade, but it can definitely be, I think with fiction, and James, you probably would be able to weigh in on this a bit better, but I think with fiction, it's always going, the narrative, how the pull of the story is always going to win the day. And, that's why you get a complete nobody first time author getting these amazing kind of book deals for their first novel, because just the writing is so incredible. That happens much, much less frequently in nonfiction. Those big advances go to the kind of the brand names, really.
Yeah, absolutely. In an effort to not overrun too badly, we should try and wind up. First thing to say though is if you didn't get a chance to read those submissions, please do, because we'll be coming back to those once you've heard on Wednesday some stuff about sales and marketing and publicity, some sort of tools for promoting books. We're going to do another breakout session, and we're going to talk about, like, say we've acquired these books, say we're actually going to publish them, how would we use those tools to actually make them successful? Now, Jessica, do you want to...
Yes, if we just slide share just quickly, just so I can just remind everyone what we've got coming up.
Is that the correct one?
I'm not seeing it there we go. Yes, so please don't forget your questions. This Slido is going to be open all week. The access code is 703766. And so we will be collating them all week. So please ask your questions if you think about one in the middle of the night. I mean, never know. So we will be looking at them all over the week. Tomorrow, we are going to be talking editorial. So we have someone from children's fiction and non-fiction editorial tomorrow. And so back here, 5 o'clock, keep sharing the hashtag @JobandPublishing on Twitter, and keep your questions coming. And we look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow. So thank you very, very much for taking part.
Absolutely, and do look out for, I think Sam from Eric is going to send you a video, like a really good interview, like a conversation between two people at Pan Macmillan, which is really, really good. So I think that's going to be popping into your inbox very soon. Look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, guys. Bye.